Welcome back to Your 1230, the only podcast where our guests tell their story with the help of 12 questions in just 30 minutes. Today, we are really excited to speak with Jeff Bajorek. Jeff helps sales organizations perform better because selling is not an instruction manual to be followed. It's a series of problems to be solved. Your team has what it takes, but fear generally will hold them back. They could be afraid of appearing salesy, afraid to do it wrong, and they're afraid they won't do a good job. That's why Jeff helps salespeople believe they can sell by equipping them with the tools, rules, and frameworks to release their selling genius. People work with Jeff, they believe they're capable of doing things that they weren't before. Jeff, welcome. Very excited to have you here today.
Happy to be here, Mike. I appreciate you saying nice things about me. And I love the theme of this podcast. 12 questions, 30 minutes. I better keep my answers brief. That's what I'm taking away from that is, Jeff, answer and get out of the way because we got stuff to get to and we don't have long to get into it.
Well, I didn't say that, but if the answers are brief, that's great. And as I'll tell some of our guests, if we don't get to the 12 questions, I haven't had the podcast police come for me yet, so don't worry about that.
Okay.
But as I kind of pick and choose what to read and introduce you with, because there's a lot in your background. When you meet somebody new or when you tell somebody what you do, how do you describe it to them?
This is one of those things where it's always kind of been tricky because I do so many things. But I help sales teams perform better. I help sales organizations perform better. I help salespeople perform better. You can rotate those nouns out of that statement if you'd like, but that's really what it comes down to. And I think one of the things I've gotten too caught up in is the marketing speak behind stuff rather than just blatantly telling people what I do. I help people perform better because I dig at the things that hold them back. I ask questions that other people don't ask, and I uncover the underlying root cause for people not doing what they know they need to do. So some people say that's life coaching. I leave that to my wife. She's much better at that than I am. But I think it's important that people realize that most of their sales problems are not really rooted in sales. They're rooted in something else that prevents the productivity. It prevents the prioritization. It prevents the focus. It's typically a lack of belief in what you're doing that prevents you from doing it. And I help people, one, recognize that. Then two, rationalize that, whether or not it's actually true, right? I mean, do you really not believe in what you're doing? Or do you believe in it? You just can't get yourself to do it, right? I mean, it's that thing that holds us back is typically right in front of our nose and we just can't see it. So once you can see it, it becomes something you can negotiate. And then once you can negotiate, you can actually do what you need to do.
That's an awesome answer. And there's plenty of things I want to follow up on because you've said a lot there. And first thing I want to hit on is the problem solving piece, asking questions others won't or don't or should, but I can't think of.
Sure.
So what would be an example of a question like that? And how do you get people to answer it?
It's hard to just generically say that. I don't have these things that are scripted, Mike. So it's not, here, let me run through my list of discovery questions in the discovery interview. And actually, that's kind of the key to what I do. I'm brave enough to let that discovery conversation go where it needs to go. And I rely a lot on my instincts. But I don't think those instincts are special. I think that every salesperson that's out there, every entrepreneur that's out there, anybody who's trying to make a sale, right? Whether you're listening to this, and you say, well, I'm not in sales, I'm an entrepreneur. Like, yeah, right, buddy. We were just speaking about those things that, get in the way of us doing what we need to do, right? The superstitions we tell ourselves, the stories we tell ourselves are often our biggest roadblocks. But when it comes to that discovery interview, when it comes to that discovery discussion, if you allow yourself to stay in the moment, and when you know what you're looking to learn, you intuitively understand the questions that will help you get there. But most people, really just about everybody, I've only dealt with a couple of people ever who are brave enough to actually ask what their intuition is telling them to ask. Most people talk themselves out of doing the things that they know that they need to do because since there aren't very many people doing it this way, it feels like it's not safe for me to proceed, right? So when you talk to salespeople, for instance, all a salesperson wants to do is a good job. They want to do good work. They want to be told they did good work. They want to be recognized for it, and they'd like to be paid for it too. But it's really more about the recognition than it is about the pay. And in order to do good work, they want to find the most logical, the most widespread, the most defendable or defensible means of doing a good job, right? So they're going to look for a template or a playbook or whatever people are saying worked for them. They want to go with that. Because the last thing a salesperson wants to do is let anybody down, right? So we get the two forces here are I want to do good work and I don't want to let anybody down. So how do I guarantee or how do I give myself the highest percentage chance of winning? Well, I look at what everybody else is out there using to get to that point. And if we do what everybody else is doing, we're going to get mediocre results. That's the definition of mediocrity. Now, mediocre might be better than what you're getting right now. So it might look good, but we still have to call a thing a thing. And mediocrity is not what most people aspire to do, but it is safe. And so when you're talking about the difference between safety and doing your very best work, that puts everybody, it puts human beings in a very precarious position. It's scary to do your best work. You're putting yourself out there. You're out on a limb. You could fail spectacularly, or you could do the thing that no one else thought could be done. And a lot of people will skew back towards safety. But the problem with safety is that you're holding yourself back. And a lot of times you try so hard to be safe that you don't end up succeeding. And so not only are you not succeeding, you're dissatisfied. And it's a terrible, the word is on the tip of my tongue and it is escaping me right now, but it's just, you're incredibly restless when that is the case. And I cut through that when I talk to my clients, when I talk to my prospects. I ask them what it is that they want to be doing. I ask them about their intuitions. I ask them, what are you doing that you think is going to work? Why isn't it working for you? What would you like to do if you were in a position where you were told you couldn't fail? What would you do? What's your gut feeling telling you? What's that voice in the back of your head telling you? We dig into those things because I think they're important to pay attention to. So those are questions that I ask that a lot of other people don't, because the typical discovery framework is, well, okay, what are your results now? What would you like them to be? What have you done to achieve them? What has worked well for you? What isn't? I mean, it just, most people want to, again, put themselves in this little box where if I ask the same questions, then I know I won't make any mistakes. And if I script those questions, I know I won't leave anything out. And you can't go anywhere beautiful that way. You can't go anywhere groundbreaking that way. And quite frankly, all of those frameworks are out there. If you're not going to do something that no one else is going to do, why should they talk to you at all? So I'm rambling a little bit here, Mike, and I know we've got 12 questions to get through, and
No, I liked where you started the answer by saying, you can't think of anything general because you go with your intuition, which I think kind of do a good job of explaining why many people don't, because it's not safe. And that the definition of mediocrity is what a large group of people are doing to hit kind of a middle target of results, even if they don't realize that's what they're doing. You joked up front, though, that you're not a life coach, but getting people to kind of be comfortable in talking about these things, you're going to sometimes get into personal-ish things, as well as it's right in front of their face. They can't see it, but many others can. So how do you navigate that conversation? Besides following what makes sense or what your intuition is telling you, how do you get someone to see something that's in front of their face that they can't see? Is it something that you have honed over time, or what does that look like?
I mean, sometimes it's just storytelling. The situation I just laid out plagues every single salesperson at least once in their career. Some are better about negotiating it than others. So I can tell a story about myself and my own experience. I can tell a story about another client. I can tell a story about a colleague, a friend that help to paint a context around the situation that my client or my prospect is in at that point. That's always helpful. But I think so much of that is about creating a space, a vulnerable enough space where you can actually talk about those things. And look, there's a point where I'm not credentialed or qualified, let alone licensed to have some of these conversations. And I can recall one client in particular where this woman had real self-worth issues. And because of some things that had happened that she alluded to, but we didn't go into, there's some relationship issues that she had. And I said, you're going to need to address these. I said, there's some of this stuff that I can help you with, and there's some of this stuff I can't. But the stuff I can't help you with, that is going to get in the way of the stuff I can help you with. So you're going to need to, and whether or not you want to, addressing these issues is what is going to help you get over the hump. And at some point, I finally, because she didn't want to, I said, I respect that, but this is kind of as far as we can go until you get to the bottom of that stuff. So I really don't know what else to tell you, and it's so much about selling, particularly consultative selling. And I know you know this because of, by way of what you do. Look, best practices only work in the presence of the truth. So if you're not willing to tell the whole truth, then we can't get past a certain point. And you as the consultant, you as the seller, you as the entrepreneur, fill in the blank, right? You have to be willing to create a vulnerable enough space where the truth can be told. That is, I think, the biggest difference between someone who really does good consultative selling and someone who's just going through the motions. If you're going through the motions, I can tell. I know you've had these 12 questions, so to speak, scripted for a while. I know you go, oh, wait, how long before we get to do you have budget? Are you the decision maker? What's the timing? Like, you know what I mean? We all know that those things need to be solved for. But if you're running through a script, I can tell. If you're pausing and thinking and giving thoughtful questions based on the answers I gave you, if you're going down certain rabbit holes because you need the context for the information, if you're doing those things, I can tell. And that means that you do not have any barriers up. That means this isn't a contrived conversation. That means I can be real. You really want to know more about what I'm telling you. That makes me feel validated, as the prospect. And now I feel, okay, this person's going off script. This person wants to know me. They want to know more. They probably need to in order to help me the way I hope they can help me. Well, maybe I can give them a little more. And once the guard is let down on both ends of both ends of that conversation, now we can get somewhere real. Now we can do something impactful. Most sellers are afraid to go there because you lose control. You give up a little bit of control. And we have to stop thinking about selling and the sales process as an exercise in control, because it turns people off. And there are just too many things that are out of your control for that to be a reasonable strategy.
And that's a good story that you tell, and it reminds me of kind of, as we've talked a few times before today, what we agree on, and it's essentially that frameworks, playbooks, best practices are all good things. But if you are not, in fill in the blank, smart enough, you don't know enough, you don't have enough experience to apply them to your current situation, to what makes sense for you and where you're looking to go, they're only going to get you so far. And unfortunately, you're probably going to lean back to what is safe, what you've been doing before. So you have to let go, and you have to be okay with making mistakes, trying things out, and then readjusting on the fly. And we've talked about that. I do think we see very similarly there. What I wanted to kind of follow up on, you mentioned entrepreneurs, not sellers. Sometimes they'll think of themselves like that. Really, entrepreneurs for sure, but pretty much everybody is selling something, whether it is a product, a service, a solution. Everybody's got something to sell. So this feeling salesy is something that people will say that they, don't like, don't want to be. They have a negative connotation to it. But I like the way that you've described being salesy, or kind of getting past that. If you could
Mhm.
kind of go over how you help people do that as well.
Well, let's think about what selling is and what it isn't. Um, I think that for too long, selling has been equated with the transfer of money. And I think that people, some rightly, others not so rightly, have issues with money. So selling becomes something deeply personal, deeply emotional, and deeply terrifying when you hold on to something so dearly as your money. And I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm saying we need to recognize what money is and what it isn't. That's another podcast for another time. But most people don't have problems with salespeople. They have problems with their money. Therefore, salespeople are a threat to their money, which means salespeople are the problem, because we're not supposed to talk about our money problems, right? I'd rather point my finger at someone and blame them for my money issues. So when we step back, though, and we think about what selling really is, the best definition I ever heard from somebody else about selling is Brian Tracy. This was in The Psychology of Selling, is an audio program I listened to. This was before audiobooks, right? This was before audible.com and all those things. This was a CD program in my car. Brian Tracy, The Psychology of Selling, he said, selling is a transfer of enthusiasm from one party to another. And I said, oh, that's different. I like that. And so when you remove money from the picture, when you talk about how, when I was 16 years old and I wanted to borrow the car on a Friday night to go out with my friends, I had to ask permission for the keys, and I had to earn it, right? Well, there was no money exchanged. I asked for something. Most times it was given to me. Sometimes it wasn't. I made the sale or I didn't. Now we can argue about whether or not I had to put gas in the car afterward and if that counted as an exchange of value, but there was no rental fee there, right? I asked permission, I got it. When you think about newborns, infants, right? They can't even speak yet, but they let you know when they're uncomfortable. They are selling you on their discomfort and hoping that you have the solution for them, right? I mean, and they have an alarmingly high close rate. They get what they want. They get what makes them feel better. It's a transfer of enthusiasm. They're enthusiastic about their discomfort. You're enthusiastic about their comfort. That exchange actually works pretty well for everybody involved. So when we step back and we remove money from the discussion, we start to see it a little more clearly. So I'll take that a step further. I'll say that anytime you ask anybody for anything, anytime you ask them to do anything, whether it's for you or someone else, when you ask them to do something they wouldn't have done if it weren't for you asking, that's a sales call. When they do it, you made a sale. That makes them your customer. Let's think about how we treat other people who either are our customers or we would like to be our customer. And we think about human relationships. We think about, what if we just had that lens to look through for every human interaction we have on a day-to-day basis? Let's think about how we would still disagree with people, right? I'm not saying we'd all get along. It wouldn't be utopia. We wouldn't be, sitting around the campfire playing guitars and singing Kumbaya, but we would disagree differently. We would disagree a lot more respectfully. We would have more empathy. We would listen better. We would try to give the other party in the discussion more credibility so that we can understand where they're coming from. We would basically do everything that Stephen Covey wrote about how to be an effective human being, right? The seven habits of highly effective people. Like, in that way, sales is the key to a happier existence for everybody on the planet. But if we continue to approach it from a cynical standpoint, from an invulnerable place, from a place of fear where and scarcity, where we're, hoping someone doesn't take advantage of us and they haven't earned the right for me to hope anything different, it's really cynical. And I think it leads to less a less valuable or a less enthusiastic customer experience, right? And so, what are we trying to make happen here? And if we could just redefine the lenses that we look through, I think we can make it better for everybody.
I absolutely love those stories and examples that you paint, from the screaming child, or you as a young, wide-eyed 16-year-old asking for the car, and then most times getting it, which obviously you were, because you were closing for as long as you can remember. So I didn't expect anything different. Great examples, supported by Brian Tracy and Stephen Covey. For those not familiar with either of those authors, please check out everything they've done. Exceptional works. Speaking of exceptional works in writing, I'm going to try a smooth transition here. You've written a few books, the newest of which, When It Goes Sideways, which is rather timely given the kind of swing in markets we've seen over the last, say, 6 to 18 months. So what is that about? How did you write it?
It was spring 2020. The world had shut down. I wasn't traveling. No one was traveling. And I knew that there was an opportunity for me to get some work out there, get some ideas out there that would hopefully shed some new perspective on the environment that we were selling in. Heard a lot of people say, if I can't be face to face with my customers, and Zoom to Zoom doesn't count, then I can't sell. A lot of people in the real estate, had some things they needed to shift around. And to me, I challenged that. I said, what do you mean if you can't get face to face, you can't sell? If selling is a transfer of enthusiasm, if selling is an exchange of value, well, if the only value you're exchanging is a round of golf or a nice meal at a steakhouse, what are you really doing here, right? Like, if you could only sell face to face, then my friend, you could never sell. It was never about the right things. People didn't like to hear that, by the way. And so I tried to provide some perspective for what to do and how to rethink what was going on. And so the crux of that book, the model or the framework contained in that book is one I call PARE, P-A-R-E. We have to pause, assess, reflect, and execute. So in light of a changing environment around us, what do? You got to stop the flat spin. You have to somehow get in the way of, you have to prevent yourself from getting in your own way, rather, and the world is rapidly changing. So what do we need to do? First thing we need, take time out. Stop, give yourself a break. You get caught up in the zeitgeist of everything, it's really hard to make rational decisions. So give yourself permission to take time out. It's really hard to do. Very simple thing, very hard to do. The next letter is A, so assess. Remind yourself of what you know to be true. What is your current situation? What are your current objectives? Where are you lacking? What do you need? Let's prioritize those things. And then of a list of 20 priorities, write them down on paper. It's important, pen and paper, and then tear the list off after 3. Don't throw that list away. Don't throw the rest away. Set them aside for a second. Once you take care of 1, 2, and 3, and if you have more than 3 priorities, you have 0 priorities. Thank you, Jim Collins. That's another author everybody should be following, especially in the entrepreneurial space. Tear the list off after 3. Then do those things. Then when you come back to your list, recognize how many things have been crossed off that list. Because when you take care of 1, 2, and 3, you typically knock off 7, 9, 13, 17, and 21 too, right? Now you can do it again. But that's the assessment part. Remind yourself of what you know to be true. What are the things that need to happen? R's for reflect. Where do you plan? What do you plan to do? What are your options, right? You reflect on your current state. You reflect on your future state. Now you have an opportunity to think about how to get there. And E is for execute. And so now it's about getting down and doing the work. It's about having an accountability partner who supports you, who can help you when you're not motivated, who can help remind you of how talented you are, who can help remind you rather of how capable you are. But that's a framework for whenever things go out of control. And real estate markets have swings. Entrepreneurial markets have swings. The economy has swings. We were all lulled into believing that it was going to be a gravy train forever. And a lot of people in the financial sectors were like, this is the longest bull market we've ever seen. We hope the bottom doesn't fall out, but there has to be a regression toward the mean at somewhere. There's just there's always a regression to the mean. It's statistics. So we knew something was coming. We didn't know when. Then when it came, people didn't want to admit it. People didn't want to recognize it. They didn't want to do anything about it. Well, okay, time out. Where are we? What can we do about it? How are we going to do that? It's such basic advice, but I put it in a way that I put it in a framework, in a format that I think is approachable for people. And it's I think in many ways it's just permission to do again what you know you really need to do, but you're afraid to. How do you take time out? But we have so many things that we need to accomplish, so many things we need to keep up with. I have to tweet and I have to follow on, with my Instagram stuff, and I have to go to this networking meeting, and I have to have these client interactions, and I have to do my job, and I have family and kids and in-laws and parents and children. It's easy to let that spin out of control, but you have to remind yourself of what's important, and then you need to be diligent enough and disciplined enough to execute.
A lot of good stuff in that answer, but I want to go back to the beginning because I think that's the biggest takeaway is that if you can have 3 priorities, no more, you are probably going to tick off another 7, 8, 9 things on your to-do list that you didn't realize because you're now focused on what are the biggest things for me to do. And even as you went through that example of I've got to do this and social media, that, they're all part of something bigger, or they are achieving something that you're doing in your work. So if you understand the why you're doing it and how you can get it done, that's the real goal there, is to have just the top priorities as opposed to the easier things just to knock off something on the to-do list. So I think that's really excellent example you give there. You also host the Rethink the Way You Sell podcast.
Mhm.
We've talked a lot about the way that you help others sell. What do you talk about on the show, and who are you talking to, who are you talking with, and who should listen?
I think anybody who sells something, particularly if you struggle with wrapping your brain around the idea that you're in sales, that was me a long time ago. And once I learned that lesson, once I was able to redefine selling for myself, I was able to lean into it and recognize that I could have a lot of fun and make a huge impact, not just for myself, but for the people that I serve. And so anybody who's ever struggled with that is going to take something out of this podcast. And the subject material is different from season to season. I've broken it into seasons because I wanted to tackle certain subjects individually. The first season's about understanding what your purpose is and what is your why, is what that season's called. It's an exercise that I do with all my clients, so it seemed like a very appropriate place to start the podcast. The second season is all about what it means to be a top performer, some of the intangible things that make top performers great. I say there's only a 5% difference between mediocrity and superstardom, and season 2 goes into that. Season 3 is all about prospecting. And I have a different perspective on prospecting than most people do. I'm not just giving you call scripts. I'm not sending you email frameworks. Actually, there is one messaging framework that ties all of my other rules and things like that together. But I give you the constraints for which you can solve those problems versus just following those scripts. Season 4 is called Sell Like You, which is really all about what it means to bring yourself to the sales process. So it breaks down the different elements of the sales process, but I'm also having guests on to talk about what it means to them to do their very best work to bring their whole selves to their sales methods. So season 4 is going to wrap up here in May. I think I have to go back. I kind of record this stuff and stay 5 or 6 weeks ahead. So I think it's going to end right around the middle of May. And then in June, we're going to go with something a little bit different for season 5. It doesn't have a title yet, but I like the podcast because it's a very neat container for some of these concepts and frameworks, and you can just binge listen to 7 or 8 episodes at a time and get something out of it, rather than just having a regular interview show where people come on. I did that for 5 years prior and wanted to do something a little different for this one. So it's a long-winded description of my podcast, but
It's a good
iTunes only gives
description.
you so many characters.
It's a good description. Check out Rethink the Way You Sell podcast with Jeff. I think just the way that you reframe selling altogether is going to be valuable for pretty much anybody because truthfully, we all are selling something, as you said. And if we rethink of it as the enthusiasm, the exchange of value, it really puts that on its head. Will make Those of us who are uncomfortable with sales, okay, this is something that I'm doing. Or it's those who are already good with sales, like, okay, now I can sell like you, sell like myself. I can add some personality. I can add what I bring to the equation, a little different than others. So I absolutely love that. Somehow we are already at time today. We've covered a decent amount of material, but is there anything that I didn't ask you that I probably should have?
No, it's your show, man. Ask me what you want. If you think of some other stuff you want to ask me, then let's do 30 more minutes sometime. But no, I can't think of anything that we didn't cover that I had intended to when I showed up today.
So then let's get out of here on this. Back to season one. What is your
Yes.
why, Jeff?
Oh, you know, I struggled in sales for the first 11 months or so until I had the right mentor. And the right mentor came along at the perfect time because I was getting ready to leave. I was going to quit. And as soon as someone took me under their wing and showed me what selling could be, showed me how fulfilling it could be, showed me how much help I could do for others, it opened up a completely different world of possibilities for me. And the arc of my career changed, but more importantly, the arc of my life changed. And when that light bulb went on over my head and I saw the whole world differently, it was so powerful. I knew right then that I wanted to shine that light on other people, that I wanted to encourage and empower people to have their own light bulb moments like that. And so when I see someone realize that they can do something they never thought they could do because they're giving a different, or they have a different perspective now, that lights me up. That's why I get out of bed every day. That impact is huge. Gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. So that's my why.
I can see you light up as you talk about it, so I certainly believe it. And going back to having another 30-minute conversation, having that mentor, having the objective eyes, somebody who can help you see what's right in front of your face that you can't see, and with somebody who really wants to help you, incalculable value. So I'm with you on that as well. Jeff, thank you so much for your time today. Where can our listeners, we'll post to the podcast, we'll post your books, but where can our listeners connect with you or find out more if they want to do so?
The best place to go is jeffbajorek.com. If you just want to learn more about me, what it's like to work with me, obviously links to my blog and my podcast are there. You can also go to rethinkthewayyousell.com, which is my community platform. You can join, just ask or answer a couple of questions. I want to know, where you found me and what you hope to find in this platform, but entrance is free. And I've got all my content there easily organized. It's probably the best place to peruse the content. The podcast is there as a course, so you can listen to every episode as kind of a lesson. I've got some worksheets in there. It's the best way to interact with the content. But if you just want to know more about me, jeffbajorek.com, and LinkedIn, of course. Do I even have to mention LinkedIn anymore? You can find me there for sure.
Well, we will post all of those. And again, thank you for joining us. This was fantastic. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. This was fun.